Evening. A parking lot in a quiet suburban shopping center was filled with the usual chaos. Cars coming and going, kids shouting for attention, and shoppers hastily grabbing bags from their trunks. Among the usual bustle, Officer Ben Roberts stood, watching a woman who had just finished a grocery run. In the chaotic setting, no one noticed the two unmarked police cars quietly rolling into the lot, their sirens off, blending in with the background noise. Detective Elena Diaz, at 40, had been on the force for almost 18 years. Tonight, she was simply another tired shopper, carrying bags of groceries as she made her way back to her car. Clad in a simple navy sweater, jeans, and a jacket, there was nothing about her that screamed detective. Just a woman completing her errands after a long work week, her badge tucked safely in her jacket. As she walked across the lot, she couldn't help but notice a pair of approaching footsteps. Officer Ben Roberts, only 28, had been on the job for 6 years, but still carried himself with the sense that he had something to prove. His hand frequently hovered near his service weapon, a habit he couldn't shake. He'd noticed Elena leaving the store, and something about her confident stride she carried caught his attention. She didn't glance nervously at his squad car as most citizens did. Perhaps it was his bad day catching up to him, or maybe something about her presence just didn't sit right. "Hey," he called out sharply, "hold up." Elena's fingers instinctively tightened around her grocery bags, recognizing that tone. It was one she'd heard too many times, often from the other side of the badge. She slowed her pace, but didn't stop, glancing over her shoulder to acknowledge that she'd heard him. "I'm talking to you," Roberts said, striding quickly towards her, his steps aggressive. Her partner, Officer Jake Miller, lingered by their squad car, seemingly uninterested in what was unfolding. Elena stopped by her car, setting her bags gently on the trunk before turning to face the officer. "Good evening, officer. Is something wrong?" Elena asked, her voice calm but measured, hoping to de-escalate the situation. Robert stepped in too close, invading her personal space with a sense of authority. His gaze swept over her, taking in the brand-name purse, the late-model sedan, the organic groceries that seemed out of place in this part of town. "I need to see some ID," Robert said bluntly, offering no explanation or basis for his request. Elena stood firm, her voice unwavering. "Officer, may I ask what this is about? I'm just finishing up my shopping." "I didn't ask for your life story," Robert snapped back, his patience thinning. "ID, now." A small crowd had gathered by this point. A couple of college students had stopped loading their bags, an elderly woman with her grandson stood frozen by their car, and a teenager with brightly colored hair had begun recording the encounter with their phone. Elena could feel the heat of the moment rising. She could show her badge and end this right now, but something in her held back. She wasn't just a detective. She was a citizen with rights, and she wasn't going to let those be trampled on. "I need you to articulate the crime you're suspecting me of," she said, her tone professional, yet firm. "Without reasonable suspicion, I'm under no obligation to show you my ID." Robert's jaw tightened, his temper flaring. "Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order?" Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm exercising my constitutional rights. I'm not refusing anything. I just need you to explain why you're stopping me."
The parking lot was palpable now, the crowd sensing something was off. Robert stepped closer, his anger surfacing, but before he could escalate the situation further, his partner, Officer Miller, intervened, jogging toward them. "Elena," Miller said, his voice tinged with concern, "let's just wrap this up. This doesn't need to go any further." But Roberts was already too deep into his power trip. "You're resisting arrest," he growled, grabbing Elena by the throat in one swift motion, slamming her back against the trunk of her car. The crowd gasped, the sound of an orange rolling across the asphalt filling the air. A jar of pasta sauce shattered on the pavement. "Think you're smart?" Robert sneered, his hand tightening on her throat. "Think you can tell me how to do my job?" Elena's hands rose instinctively, not to fight, but to create space. Her training kicked in. Stay calm, don't escalate, survive. But there was something else too, an undeniable fury bubbling beneath the surface. She was a detective, but in this moment, she was just another black woman being subjected to the whim of a reckless officer who didn't care about the badge she carried. Officer Miller was now rushing over, his eyes wide with realization. "Ben, stop it. You can't do this." But Roberts either didn't hear or didn't care. "You're resisting arrest," Roberts repeated, his words barely coherent as he continued to tighten his grip. "I'm not resisting anything," Elena managed to rasp, her voice strained but controlled. The crowd was murmuring, the phones continuing to record every moment. Miller was now close enough to see the phones, the growing crowd of witnesses, and he understood the gravity of what was happening. The situation was no longer a simple confrontation. It was becoming a public spectacle. And the fallout from this moment would be far-reaching. It was in that instant that Elena made her decision. Slowly, deliberately, her hand reached into her jacket. Roberts, noticing the motion, tensed, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, but Elena was faster. She pulled out her badge, flipping it open to reveal the gold insignia that glinted in the dim parking lot light. "Officer Roberts," she said calmly, her voice carrying the weight of her 2 decades of experience. "You've just assaulted a detective with the city's police force. Let go of me now." The transformation in Roberts' face was immediate. The flush of anger drained from his cheeks, replaced by a sickly pallor. His hand dropped from her throat like it had been burned, and he stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a shopping cart that had been abandoned in the lot. The crowd's reaction was swift and visceral. Some whistled low, others laughed. The teenager with the purple hair zoomed in on Robert's face as he stood there, visibly shaken, trying to comprehend what had just happened.
Frozen, torn between his loyalty to his partner and his understanding of how deeply this was going to damage them both. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry," Roberts muttered, his words barely audible. Elena straightened her jacket, rubbing her throat where his fingers had left bruises that would turn dark by morning. She turned to Miller, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You should have known better," she said, before bending down to pick up the spilled groceries. A woman rushed over to help, gathering the oranges that had scattered across the pavement. A man handed Elena a plastic bag to collect what had survived the fall. "Thank you," Elena said to the strangers, her composure returning. Then she turned back to Roberts, who was still standing there, like a man who had lost his sense of control. "Officer Roberts," Elena began, pulling out her phone, "I'm calling this in. You should contact your union representative. You're going to need one." As she dialed, she could hear the whispers spreading through the crowd, the video already going viral. Her mind was already shifting to the bigger picture. This wasn't just about an assault. It was about something much larger, something systematic. Roberts, still dazed, tried once more. "Captain, please, I didn't mean it like that. I was just—" "You didn't mean to assault a detective, but you did. And now we're going to discuss how far this goes." She stepped away, her mind already working through the next steps, the next moves in what was about to become a full-blown investigation. And she would lead it, no matter the cost. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her daughter, Maya. "I saw it on the news. Is everything okay?" Elena stared at the screen for a moment, the weights of the moment sinking in. She had always protected Maya from the darker realities of her work, but now it felt like those walls were coming down. She typed back quickly, "I'm fine. Stay in school, sweetheart. I'll explain later." At the precinct, her colleagues were already buzzing with the news, but Elena's mind wasn't on the immediate aftermath. She needed to focus on what was coming next. The corruption that she had always suspected within the force now seemed undeniable. What had just happened to her in that parking lot wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something much bigger. Later that evening, as Elena sat in her office going through reports, she received a knock at the door. She looked up to see Captain Rebecca Shaw, an officer she'd worked with for years, standing in the doorway. Her expression was grim. "Elena, I need to talk to you," Shaw said softly, stepping inside. She closed the door behind her. "This isn't just about Roberts. There's more going on here than anyone realizes." Elena set down the report she was reading and motioned for Shaw to continue.
Voice as she leaned in, speaking urgently. "There's been talk about a group inside the department. They call themselves the Watchers. They're a faction that works with developers to push out low-income residents in targeted neighborhoods. Roberts, Garrett, and others are part of it. But it's not just them. There's more. A lot more." Elena's heart sank. She had always suspected corruption ran deep, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just rogue officers. It was a network, one that connected the police force with corrupt business interests, and now it was all coming to light. "Do you have proof?" Elena asked, her voice cold and resolute. Shaw hesitated. I do. I'll show you everything, but we need to move quickly. If we don't, they'll destroy it all before we can get the evidence we need." Elena stood up, determination flooding her veins. "Then let's get to work." She had already been grabbed by the throat once, but she wasn't going to let that be the end of her story. This was just the beginning. The next morning, Elena sat across from her colleague, Detective Aaron Blackwell, in a quiet corner of the precinct. She was reviewing the evidence Shaw had gathered, which painted a disturbing picture of the network she was now trying to expose. It wasn't just isolated incidents of corruption, it was systemic. A covert operation where officers, city officials, and powerful developers had been working together for years, targeting struggling neighborhoods for gentrification. The developers, like Gregory Madsen, had been buying up properties at rock-bottom prices after orchestrating a campaign of fear and harassment. And the officers, under the guise of law enforcement, had been the muscle. "Shaw's right," Blackwell said, breaking the silence. "If we don't move fast, this will disappear faster than we can get a handle on it." Elena nodded, her fingers tapping on the file in front of her. "We need to take down the entire network. If we go after Roberts and the others without dismantling the system behind them, they'll just be replaced. This is bigger than just cleaning up a few bad apples." Blackwell's eyebrow raised. "You think Madsen's really involved in all of this?" "I don't think it. I know it," Elena replied, her voice firm. "The financials don't lie. Every time one of these properties changes hands, there's a pattern of payments to people in power. Madsen's been pulling the strings behind the scenes for too long." Blackwell's face tightened as he absorbed her words. "So, what's our next move?" "We take down the people at the top. We get the evidence we need to implicate Madsen and everyone else involved, and then we expose it all. We've got one shot at this, and it's got to count." Elena stood up and grabbed her jacket. "Meet me at the courthouse in an hour. We're going to start taking down the House of Cards."
Buzzing with activity, as Elena and Blackwell arrived. The district attorney, Thomas Hayes, had already been briefed on the situation, but he wasn't as prepared for what they were about to present. Elena had gathered everything she could: financial records, eyewitness accounts, and testimony from whistleblowers like Shaw. Now, it was time to bring it all to light. "We're going in strong," Elena said to Blackwell as they walked through the hall. "This is bigger than just a case of police brutality. This is organized crime disguised as law enforcement, and it's time we make it known." Inside the courtroom, things were already heating up. Roberts was there, looking disheveled and anxious as he sat next to his lawyer, trying to avoid the growing crowd of reporters. His smug demeanor from the previous days was gone, replaced by an aura of fear and uncertainty. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she took her seat at the prosecution table. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Sarah Montgomery, called the court to order. "We're here today to address allegations of corruption within the police department," the judge began. "Detective Diaz, I trust you're prepared to present the evidence." Elena nodded, standing up as she prepared to lay out the case that would change everything. Elena began by outlining the basic facts. Officer Roberts, along with several others in the force, had been involved in an illegal scheme that manipulated real estate markets in low-income neighborhoods. She didn't stop there. She dove into the financial records, showing how the department's officers had been receiving bribes from developers like Gregory Madsen. The money had been funneled through various shell companies, all designed to hide the connection between the officers and the developers. Elena's voice was steady, though she could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her. This was no longer about just one officer. It was about exposing a web of corruption that reached all the way to the city's top leadership. Officer Roberts was not working alone, Elena continued, presenting witness statements and a timeline of events that proved the conspiracy had been in motion for years. He and his colleagues were part of a broader operation, a well-oiled machine that used fear and harassment to drive out residents from their homes, only to have those properties sold for a fraction of their value to developers who profited off the displacement. The courtroom was silent, save for the clicking of keyboards as reporters typed up every word. Elena paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle in. Then she dropped the bombshell. This operation was backed by some of the highest levels of our city's leadership, including Gregory Madsen, a developer who used his influence to manipulate city policies and control the police force. He didn't just buy property, he bought protection. The gasp from the gallery was audible, and the reporters snapped their cameras to attention. Elena turned toward Roberts, who now looked like a man caught in a trap. The smugness that once defined him was gone, replaced by an expression of fear and uncertainty.
He listened attentively as Ellen detailed the connections between the officers involved, including the links to city officials and Madsen's vast development empire. She showed the jury the video footage that had been recorded in the parking lot that night, Robert's assault on Ellen. The footage was powerful, but it was just the beginning. Ellen had far more damning evidence to present. She turned to the stack of files next to her. "We've obtained recordings from inside the department, secret recordings made by officers who were tired of living in fear of their own colleagues. These recordings, along with financial documents, show a clear pattern of corruption that stretches beyond this city. This isn't just about one officer misusing his power. This is a network, a system designed to protect those at the top while crushing the people at the bottom." The room fell into a tense silence as Ellen clicked a button on the projector, showing images of properties marked for development. Each one had a line connecting it to Madsen, but there were more names, more officers, more city officials, more connections that went deeper than anyone had anticipated. As the prosecution's case unfolded, Ellen could see the weight of the evidence sinking in for the jury. There was no denying the truth anymore. Roberts and the others had been part of something far larger than anyone had imagined, a criminal enterprise hidden in plain sight under the guise of law enforcement. The defense team's objections were weak and futile. Richard Stockton, Roberts' lawyer, tried to discredit Ellen's evidence, claiming it was circumstantial, but the judge overruled every objection. Ellen's meticulous work, combined with the courage of those willing to speak out, had created a case so compelling that even Stockton couldn't shake it.
After a grueling 2-day trial, the jury retired to deliberate. Ellen sat in her chair, her thoughts racing as she stared at the jury box. This wasn't just about Roberts. It was about sending a message to everyone who thought they were untouchable. The power of the people, citizens who refused to be silenced, officers who chose to do the right thing, and the press that refused to back down had all come together to expose the truth. A few hours later, the jury returned. The courtroom fell silent as the forewoman stood. The first word out of her mouth was guilty, followed by the remaining charges. Roberts, Madsen, and several of the corrupt officers were convicted on all counts. The gallery erupted in applause, though Ellen remained calm. This was just the beginning. She looked across the courtroom to see her daughter, Maya, sitting in the back with a proud smile on her face. This victory was not just for Ellen. It was for the people who had been crushed under the weight of corruption for too long.
Elena was approached by members of the press who were eager for her thoughts. The case had captured national attention, and now she had to speak. Standing at the podium, she addressed the gathered reporters, her voice steady and resolute. "This case isn't just about what happened in a parking lot," Elena said. "It's about exposing a system that allowed corruption to thrive. We've shown that no one is above the law, whether you wear a badge, own property, or sit in a seat of power. Justice has been served today, but the real work is only just beginning." Her words resonated with the crowd, but Elena knew that the battle wasn't over. The city would need time to heal, and the police force would need to rebuild trust. She glanced over at Maya, who was standing beside her, a reminder of why she couldn't stop now. "We will keep fighting," Elena continued, her voice filled with conviction. "This is just the beginning." Later that evening, Elena stood in her office, staring out at the city skyline. The streets below were bustling with life, but she knew there were still many battles to fight, and she would fight them, one step at a time. With the support of those around her, Elena had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, change was possible. And she would continue to push forward, knowing that every victory, no matter how small, brought them one step closer to a fairer, more just world. And as long as she was in charge, she would ensure that justice kept going for as long as it took. Weeks passed since the trial, and the city began to shift under the weight of the truth that had come to light. Elena's role in the case had catapulted her into the spotlight, but she wasn't ready to rest. The corruption had been exposed, but there was still work to be done, and it wasn't just about those who had been brought to trial. The real challenge now was ensuring that these systemic issues didn't return, that the reforms held, and that the public trusted the justice system again. Elena sat in her office late one evening, poring over the final reports. The press was still all over the story, and the case had sparked national discussions on police reform. She knew this was bigger than her, bigger than the team who had worked tirelessly to bring these criminals to justice. This was about ensuring that the system wouldn't betray the citizens again. The corruption wasn't just the actions of a few bad officers. It was embedded in the structures, the networks that had been allowed to flourish unchecked. The work wasn't over. "Detective," Blackwell's voice interrupted her thoughts as he stepped into the office, looking weary but resolute. "We've got the financials back from Madsen's properties. Everything you suspected was right. There's a whole web of deals and payments we didn't even know about." Elena stood up, her heart racing. "Show me." They spread out the documents on her desk, maps, financial records, communications between developers and city officials. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, and each layer revealed more corruption. More names, more deals, more people involved. She had been right all along. This wasn't just about Roberts or Madsen. This was a city built on corruption, and it reached deeper than they had imagined. "Look at these payments," Blackwell pointed out, his finger tracing a string of dates and amounts. "These are bribes, Elena. This isn't just property theft. These are calculated moves to drive out entire communities." "I knew it. We're not done yet. We've got to make sure they don't cover their tracks before we can get to them. There's more to this, and we need to expose it all." Blackwell nodded. "We've got work to do, but this is the final push."
Elena and her team worked around the clock, preparing for the next phase of the investigation. The local authorities had started to crack down on the corruption within the police force, but the broader city government was still resisting. Elena knew the real challenge would come next. The push for accountability would need to extend beyond the courtroom. There were people in power who had been complicit in the corruption, and some of them were still in positions to block the reforms they had worked so hard to implement. One evening, Elena received an unexpected call. It was from Maya. "Mom, I think someone's following me." Maya's voice was tight, filled with concern. Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I've seen the same car parked across the street for the last 2 days. It's always there when I leave for school, and it's there when I come back. I think they're watching us." Elena's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Stay inside the house. Don't go out until I get there." She didn't wait for Blackwell or anyone else. She grabbed her jacket, her mind racing as she left the office. As she made her way through the city streets, the weight of the past few months seemed to settle on her. This wasn't just a fight for justice. This was a fight for her family's safety, too. The threats had already started, small ones at first, but now they were escalating. When she arrived home, she saw the car across the street, just as Maya had described it. Elena didn't hesitate. She walked straight to her front door and called 911. The officers arrived quickly, but they didn't seem surprised. They'd been monitoring the situation for a while, aware that the city was on the verge of major change. The corrupt system that had been exposed wasn't going to let go easily. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Wallace. "We've been hearing rumors. The union is already mobilizing. You and your daughter need protection." Elena read the message and replied, "I know, but we'll handle it. This isn't over." By the time the police left, the car had disappeared. But Elena knew this wasn't a random occurrence. The message was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop. They were sending a warning, and Elena couldn't afford to ignore it. The next day, Elena was called into a meeting with the FBI and the district attorney. The investigation into Madsen's empire had reached a crucial point. With all the new evidence, they were ready to move forward with the arrests of several key figures, including high-ranking city officials who had been involved in the conspiracy. "We're close," FBI Special Agent Diana Rodriguez said, looking at Elena across the conference table. "Madsen's not going to go down without a fight, but we have everything we need. We'll hit him where it hurts, the money trail." Elena nodded, but her thoughts were still with Maya. "We need to act fast. If they know we're coming, they'll start covering their tracks. I want everything sealed. No more leaks." "We're already on it," Rodriguez assured her.
Or a blur. Elena worked late into the night, coordinating with federal agents and local authorities to prepare for the raids. She knew that the stakes had never been higher. With Madsen's network crumbling, there were still those who would try to protect him, who would do anything to ensure the status quo remained intact. But Elena wasn't backing down. On the morning of the raids, Elena stood by the door of her precinct, watching as the team gathered. The weight of what they were about to do hung in the air, but there was a sense of purpose in their movements. This was it, the final push. "We're going to hit them hard," Elena said, her voice filled with conviction. "No one is above the law. Not anymore." The raids began at dawn. Elena watched from her command center as teams swarmed Madsen's properties, arresting key players in the conspiracy. At the same time, federal agents moved in on the developers' offices and the homes of corrupt city officials. The media was already buzzing with reports, and the public was watching closely. The arrests came fast, and the fallout was immediate. Madsen was arrested at his mansion, his empire collapsing around him. By mid-morning, the headlines were already calling it a victory. But Elena knew that the real work was still ahead. This was just one battle in a long war for justice.
As the dust began to settle, Elena took a moment to reflect on the past months. The fight had taken everything from her time, her energy, her peace of mind. But as the corrupt system unraveled, she saw the first signs of change. Communities that had been torn apart by gentrification began to breathe a little easier. The police force, once a symbol of distrust, was starting to rebuild its reputation. The city was beginning to heal, but Elena knew it wouldn't happen overnight. She had seen the cracks in the system, deep ones that would take years to fix, but the most important thing was that they had started to repair those cracks. A few weeks later, Elena stood in front of a crowd at a community event, speaking to a group of young officers. She had been asked to deliver the keynote address at the police academy graduation. As she looked out over the crowd, she felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "You are entering a new era of law enforcement," she told them. "The badge you wear is not a symbol of power over the people. It's a symbol of your responsibility to protect and serve, to ensure justice for all. I've seen what happens when power goes unchecked. It breeds corruption, fear, and injustice. But I've also seen what happens when good people refuse to stay silent. We can change things." The room erupted in applause, but Elena wasn't finished. "The real work starts now," she said, looking out at the officers before her. "It's on all of you to carry this forward, to rebuild trust, to make sure that justice is not just a concept, but a reality." As the years went by, Elena's work continued to inspire others. Her role as a leader in the integrity unit allowed her to drive real reform, but it was the victories, the changes she had seen in the city, that truly mattered. The corrupt officers who had once held power were behind bars. The developers who had exploited vulnerable communities were facing justice. And most importantly, the people of the city were starting to believe in the system again. One day, years after that fateful night in the parking lot, Elena stood at the memorial for those who had lost their homes, their families, and their futures due to the corruption that had plagued the city for so long. The monument stood tall, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the unwavering belief that one person could make a difference. "Maya," Elena said as she turned to her daughter standing beside her, "this is for all of us, for every person who ever believed in a better future." Maya smiled, her voice filled with pride. "You did it, Mom! You changed everything!" Elena looked up at the monument, her heart swelling with pride. The battle had been long, but the victory was worth it. And she knew that as long as she was around, justice would keep going.